Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months. My mother's voice crackled through the video call, sharp and unforgiving, echoing inside the sterile walls of my hospital room. I sat there stunned, clutching my phone with trembling hands, my abdomen twisting with pain that felt like a knife being turned inside me. But the wound she left with her words cut even deeper. It was Christmas Eve at Las Vegas Medical Center. The scent of disinfectant filled the room. Monitors beeped steadily, and my 2-year-old twins, Ethan and Emily, sat quietly in the corner, playing with blocks they didn't really understand. Nurse Valerie adjusted my IV with gentle precision, her face soft with concern. I should have been focused on the surgery ahead, on survival, but all I could hear was my parents' indifference. My name is Natasha Wilson. I'm 33 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I've been an afterthought in my own family. My younger sister Jessica was the golden child, adored, praised, protected. Meanwhile, I was invisible. That night, the truth was undeniable. My own parents would not even watch their only grandchildren while I was being prepped for emergency surgery. Not because they couldn't, but because they wouldn't. Because a concert mattered more. 6 months earlier, my husband James had been killed by a drunk driver. Since then, I'd been stumbling through life half-broken, raising Ethan and Emily while drowning in grief. When the doctors found internal bleeding that required immediate surgery, I thought foolishly that this might be the moment my parents stepped in, the moment they finally showed up for me. But when I called, my father's voice was colder than the steel of the surgical tools that would soon cut into me. "You're becoming a real nuisance, Natasha. A burden. We're retired now, we deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems." Those words lodged in my chest heavier than the fear of not surviving the operation. For 3 years, I had been sending them $500 every month to help with their mortgage and expenses. Even after James died, I didn't stop. I told myself it was duty, it was love, it was family. But in truth, it was guilt. I believed that if I gave enough, if I sacrificed enough, maybe one day they would love me the way they loved Jessica. But love doesn't work that way. As tears slid silently onto my blanket, Valerie touched my shoulder and said gently, "My friend Olivia is a professional nanny. She's wonderful with children, especially little ones who've gone through trauma. Let me call her for you." Her kindness was such a sharp contrast to my parents' cruelty that it almost broke me. My twins had already lost their father. If the surgery went wrong, they might lose me too. The thought was unbearable. But even more unbearable was the idea of leaving them in the care of people who saw them only as burdens. "Yes. Please call her," I whispered. And in that moment, I made a decision that had been building inside me for years. I was cutting the poisonous ties to the people who had raised me but never truly loved me. As the phone slipped from my hand, a flood of memories rose up, every overlooked moment of my life. When I graduated college with honors, they barely acknowledged it because Jessica had landed a commercial. When I married James, they complained about the wedding venue being too far. When the twins were born, they visited only once and said the babies were too fussy, always absent, always excusing their absence as though my life were a burden interrupting theirs. James had been my anchor. He knew disappointment too, estranged from his father for years. He used to tell me, "We'll build our own family, one that knows how to love," and for a while we did. But after the accident, I was left carrying both grief and responsibility. And still I kept sending money to my parents. Still I chose them over myself, over my children. Not anymore. When Olivia arrived, she was everything Valerie promised. Kind, professional, immediately connecting with Ethan and Emily, as though she'd known them forever. Relief washed over me, but also fear. "How much will this cost?" I asked Valerie, guilt already clawing at me. Medical bills were piling up, and James's insurance hadn't covered enough. "Don't worry about that right now," Valerie said softly. "Focus on surviving." But I couldn't stop worrying. The $500 scheduled to leave my account next week for my parents, it could cover Olivia's care. It could help me keep my children safe. And with that thought, something inside me sparked a flame of self-preservation I thought had died years ago. "Bring me my phone," I asked Valerie, my voice trembling but determined. With shaking fingers, I sent 2 messages. The first to my bank. Cancel all future transfers to my parents' account. The second to my parents, I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Do not contact me again. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, pain surged through my body. But beneath the fear, beneath the ache, something unexpected bloomed. Freedom. When I woke up after surgery, the world was a blur of white walls and antiseptic air, but the first thing I heard was the gentle laughter of my twins. Their giggles, light, unbroken, pure, pulled me back into life more than any machine could. Olivia sat beside them, stacking blocks with Ethan, while Emily clung to her arms, safe and content. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace. I had survived. But survival came with its own weight. The doctor explained that the procedure had been successful, though recovery would be long and painful. Still, I had a second chance, a chance to live differently, to stop begging for scraps of love from people who only saw me as a burden. The next morning, my phone lit up with message after message from my parents. At first, they were dismissive. "You're being dramatic. You'll regret this decision," then angry. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us." Finally panicked. "We need that money. How are we supposed to manage without it?" For years, I would have caved. I would have sent another transfer, apologized for causing trouble, tried to win their affection with sacrifice. But lying in that hospital bed, stitches tugging at my skin, my children sleeping peacefully beside Olivia, I didn't feel guilt. I felt clarity. That night, Olivia told me something I will never forget. "Natasha, sometimes family is not who shares your blood. It's who shows up when you're bleeding." Her words sank into me heavier than any insult my parents had ever thrown. Days passed, and with them came a lightness I had never known. No more monthly payments vanishing into a void of ingratitude. No more desperate calls for approval that would never come. Instead, I watched my twins smile at Olivia, their little hands reaching for her with trust. I watched Valerie stop by on her breaks, bringing coloring books and small toys. Strangers were becoming family, while my own parents revealed themselves for what they had always been: absent. When Jessica finally called, her voice was full of rehearsed sympathy. "Mom and Dad are upset. They said you cut them off without warning. You know they depend on you." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. They depend on me, and yet they couldn't be bothered to watch their grandchildren for a single night while I was on an operating table. "Jessica," I said quietly, "they made their choice, and I've made mine." There was silence on the other end, before she whispered, almost like a confession, "I always knew they treated you differently. I just never said anything." Her words should have hurt, but instead they felt like closure. At least the truth was finally spoken aloud. Recovery was slow, but every day I grew stronger. I learned how to breathe without fear, how to laugh without apology, how to love my children without the shadow of my parents looming over me. The money I once sent them became groceries, rent, childcare. It became life, our life. One afternoon, as the twins napped, I sat at the window with my journal. For the first time, I wrote without censoring myself. They called me a burden. But in truth, they were the burden I finally laid down. And as I closed the journal, I knew this was no longer just survival. This was freedom. Weeks passed, and with each sunrise, I felt like a new layer of skin was growing over the wounds I once thought would never close. The stitches from my surgery ached less, but it was the invisible scars, the ones left by years of rejection, that were finally healing. Ethan and Emily began to thrive in ways I hadn't seen before. They laughed more, clung to me less in fear, and even started sleeping through the night without crying out. Olivia's presence gave them stability, the kind I had begged my parents to provide, but never received. Watching them bloom under genuine care made me realize just how much damage indifference can do to a child. Meanwhile, my parents escalated. When the money stopped, the masks fell away completely. First came the barrage of guilt-ridden texts. "We sacrificed so much for you. You owe us." Then came the threats. "If you cut us off, don't expect us at your funeral." The cruelty was sharp, but instead of cutting me open, it revealed the truth. I had been bleeding for them my entire life. I ignored the messages, each silence a new stitch in my freedom. For once, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't bending. I was choosing my children and myself. But life has a way of testing your resolve. One Sunday afternoon, Jessica appeared at my door. Her eyes were puffy, mascara smeared as though she had been crying for hours. I hesitated before letting her in, but her voice cracked. "Please, Nat. I need to talk." She sat at my table staring at her hands. "They told me I'd get everything," she admitted. "The house, the savings, the trust fund. But when you cut them off, they panicked. They cashed out what they could and they're broke. They lied to me." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old me, the sister who wanted to reach out to comfort. But then I remembered my twins asleep in the next room, and how close I had come to leaving them alone in this world, because my parents chose Elton John over their daughter's surgery. "Jess," I said quietly, "they've been lying to both of us our whole lives. The difference is I don't believe them anymore." Tears spilled down her face, and I realized she wasn't here to reconcile, she was here because her safety net had vanished. And in that moment, I understood that breaking free from my parents wasn't just survival. It was protection for me, for my children, and even for Jessica, if she ever chose to see the truth. As she left, her shoulders hunched and her eyes hollow, I whispered a prayer she might one day find the strength I had finally claimed. That night, I tucked Ethan and Emily into bed, kissed their foreheads, and stood at the window watching the moonlight spill across the floor. For the first time in 33 years, I wasn't afraid of being without my parents. I was afraid of nothing because I had already survived their worst. Weeks later, a letter arrived in the mail with my parents' handwriting scrawled across the envelope. My chest tightened as I held it. The familiar script tugging at old instincts read it. "Forgive them, make peace." But I wasn't that woman anymore. I opened it anyway, hands steady, determined to face whatever poison they had sent. The words inside were exactly what I expected. They accused me of being ungrateful, of abandoning family, of ruining Jessica's future. They demanded I resume the monthly transfers, threatening to cut me out of their will if I didn't comply. I laughed an ugly, bitter laugh that startled even me. For years I had lived in fear of being erased from their legacy, when in truth their legacy was nothing but debt manipulation and empty promises. Being cut out wasn't a punishment, it was liberation. That night I sat with Ethan and Emily at the kitchen table. They were coloring, their tiny hands smudged with crayon wax, their eyes bright with innocence. Watching them, I made a silent vow I would never let them feel like they were burdens. They would know every single day that they were my joy, my purpose, my salvation. The months rolled by and something extraordinary happened. Without the weight of my parents' demands, I began to breathe again. I applied for a work-from-home position that allowed me to stay with the twins, and for the first time, I felt capable instead of crushed. Olivia became not just a nanny, but a friend, a sister, in all the ways Jessica had never been. Valerie visited often, her kindness grounding me. Slowly, my circle of chosen family grew. And then one spring morning, Jessica showed up again. This time she wasn't weeping, she was angry. "They've rewritten the will," she spat. "Everything goes to charity now because of you. Do you know what you've done?" I looked at her, truly looked, and realized she was still trapped in their cycle, still measuring her worth in the crumbs they dangled. I didn't feel anger, I felt pity. "Jess," I said softly, "I broke free. You still can too." Her face hardened, and she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I don't know if she'll ever see the truth, but I know I can't carry her chains for her. Years later, when Ethan and Emily were old enough to understand pieces of the story, I told them gently, "Sometimes the people who should love us the most don't know how. But that doesn't mean we aren't worthy of love." Their little arms wrapped around me, and in that embrace, I felt the legacy I was building, one of safety, honesty, and unconditional care. I may have lost the parents who gave me life, but in doing so, I gained the freedom to truly live mine. If my story touched something in you, if you've ever felt like family failed, you know this. You can choose differently. You can build your own circle, your own definition of love. Please, like this video if it resonated with you, share it so others can find courage, and subscribe for more stories like mine. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me about the moment you realized your worth, because your story could help someone else find theirs.